We all anxiously await news, hopefully, of a buyer for Shopsmith. One of the questions we have is, well, how do we go on if there isn't a buyer? And we've been discussing this a bit over at mygrowthrings.com, also on the Facebook groups, Shopsmith groups. There's lots and lots of resources. eBay, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace are just a few of those. One of the things that has come up a couple times is the need for table inserts. You know, our machines use these inserts for sawing, for sanding, for drum sanding, for dadoing, for molding, and are we locked into purchasing these directly from Shopsmith? Also, is this the ideal insert? Well, we've talked in the past about how zero clearance inserts are really important. Shopsmith has even sold a couple variations of zero clearance inserts. These are plastic, and they came without a slot. This one did have a slot in it specifically so that we could use the upper saw guard, and then you make your own saw slot. Now these are no longer available from Shopsmith, so that left us with some other aftermarket approaches, one of which was just making our own. Quarter-inch masonite is actually a pretty good starting point. Masonite being a hard board that is smooth on one face, especially if you're buying tempered hardboard, and textured on the back. And oftentimes, these are just a hair too thin for the space that we need them to fill. And so I'll use tape on the back of these to raise it up as a shim to the appropriate height. Here's one made of masonite and reinforced with wood. This is one that I purchased from a reseller that was selling these on eBay. It worked all right. This is one that I purchased that is made of phenolic resin, and it seems okay except for the fact that the bolt holes don't align. So to use this one would require some modification. Kind of a disappointment, if I have to be honest with you. Then there's this pretty fella right here. This one was 3D printed on my very own 3D printer. You can see it's printed in two parts so that it can fit on the bed of the printer, and then goes together and is held in place with the same bolts we use for a standard insert. So it's into this field that a new player has waded in, and that is Daniel Watson. Daniel Watson sent me a message, and I know that he shared with a few other people who are doing YouTube videos about a new idea that he has come up with, which is actually quite clever. And let me pull out these pieces and parts, and we'll talk about his solution. So Daniel's company is Timber and Grain Woodworks, and this is what he is calling his zero clear drill plate. This is the drill plate, this is the rip plate. And as you can see, he's actually starting with some relatively thick Baltic birch plywood that he is then CNC milling and adding to these inserts quite a number of things. Here we have threaded inserts that allow this to be bolted to the lower dust chute so that this can be used with suction for shaping and for drum sanding. And with these inserts, it can be used as a backup while drilling. So you drill directly into this plate. This becomes then sacrificial. You could dedicate it to the various size drill bits that you're using, and you can also get additional inserts. These inserts themselves appear to be about 1/2 inch thick Baltic birch. So dramatically thicker than any other solution that we have here, which I would imagine would add to stability. Now, something that he's done with his rip plate that's kind of cool is here you can see that, again, it's designed to fit into the shape, the recess in our table. This is the 510, 520 table. But when I pop this insert out, you'll see that both the insert and the sacrificial insert have rare earth magnets. Now, we've discussed a few things, Daniel and I, together, because a few of my magnets are sitting proud And he mentioned that this is something that he has since worked on because that's making the insert sit a little bit proud on this particular version. But he's already got that resolved. But again, additional inserts could be purchased, and you could then dedicate this to particular cuts. Dados, rabbets, saw cuts. What is not recommended for this is molding, which is something we'll be getting to in the near future. And that was a question I had for him because I know I'm planning on doing some molding soon. And you can see that the internal support right here is actually wider than my molding head. And so it's likely to do a fair amount of damage to this insert. But I love this idea, and anytime you can bring magnets to the party, you get my vote. And so what we would do with this is place this in place of our regular insert, have the table raised up, put a board over this, or at least over part of this, and lower the table while the saw is spinning. That will ensure that we're getting that zero clearance fit. Now, he's done something else on this, which is quite clever, but would require your attention when you set this up. And that is, he has also included some splitters. Now, these are splitters that are designed in different sizes. He has 3D printed them, and they're designed for a standard kerf blade or a thin kerf blade. And these go into this slot in the back and are then friction fit into place. And that's there to help prevent your stock from closing up after the cut. Since with this insert, we can't use the standard upper saw guard on the 510 and the 520. In order for us to make sure that our saw blade aligns perfectly and the cut that we make aligns perfectly with this, you're going to want to do quite a bit of accurate aligning of this with the blade, adjusting your headstock or your quill extension or your positioning of your carriage to make sure that you're in line with that kerf before you then would plunge your table and have the blade come up through this insert. And I believe I'll be using a thin kerf blade, so I need to swap out the riving knife. These are my terms. I'm not sure what Daniel's calling them. I suppose I could read the instructions here and see what he's calling those. He's calling them splitters. That's fair. And 3D printed right into the side of these are either FK or TK. FK for the full kerf, TK for thin kerf. So I do need to make sure I insert the correct one into place. This insert feels like it is also sitting just a tad high. And so I would suggest these surfaces right here will need to get fine-tuned with some sandpaper to get the perfect fit. You know what? Any of these, if you're a woodworker, should be something that we could easily do. But let me get my, my guard and my blade in place. So I'm positioning that with using the spacer between the headstock and the carriage because that's where this thing naturally lands. And let's see with just the main insert in place if that aligns us with the splitter or not. And for this, we would need a straight edge. So I've got an aluminum straight edge here that's straight enough. And I'm going to position this against two of the adjacent carbide teeth, or two of the carbide teeth. Yep, I'm going to have to move my table up a bit to do that. Okay, I am touching the front tooth and the splitter. So it's holding me now away from my tooth. So that means my blade has got to go this way, or my splitter has got to go that way. Well, I've got my blade and my quill retracted. And again, I like using the bumper to bring these two together. So, you know, if this were mine, I would rather this error the opposite direction. Error so that when I lower the table, the blade is from my vantage point to the left of the splitter, because then I can align it using my quill to adjust it. So I'm having to now slide either my headstock back, which I will do. I'll go to an extreme here. So I'm I don't know, 1/4 of an inch away from the spacer now. And for sure, I am far, far away from that riving knife, that splitter. So now I'm going to extend my quill out, pushing also against the straight edge. And then that is aligned. Let's check it from the other side. Again, touching a tooth, and no go. My thin kerf blade is thinner than the thin kerf riving knife. Interesting. So we have multiple thin kerf riving knives in the box. Daniel thought ahead. It wasn't just that he sent me a bunch of extras just in case. They're different thicknesses. So what do we have here? That's a thin kerf. That's a thin kerf. Okay. So he's distinguishing these with the letters TK or FK, but in addition to that, make sure you can see this. Additionally, he's got markings on there with plus signs, plus plus, and plus plus plus. All right, well, that's explained in the instructions, and it's telling me that, wow, the triple plus is awfully thin. Okay, let me see how that compares to my carbide. That's a perfect fit. So for this thickness of blade, the triple TK is the correct one to install. Good reading instructions there, Scott. So I should be able to pull this out, swap this, yeah, I have a full kerf triple X in here, which is the thinnest, I believe, of the full kerf. I can't even talk. Who am I thinking of? John Folkerth here. The thickest of the full kerf. This is the thinnest of the thin kerf. All right. I'm recording this while all of us are still kind of in limbo, a little bit almost in mourning, thinking about Shopsmith. I wish I had an update to give you. I just don't. Anyway, let's try this now against the tooth. That looks good on that side. And that looks good on that side. So this should work. Beautiful. So next we're going to raise the blade or the table up. Drop our insert in place. Now we want to take extra special care to make sure that we have got everything locked down. The carriage needs to be locked, the headstock needs to be locked, the quill needs to be locked, everything needs to be locked into place before we would make this cut. Secondly, we're going to put the fence on top as well as some wood on top. You know, I think so there is something for you to see. I think I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to let that plunge right alongside of this. Now, I don't recommend that you do this, and I'll be standing over on this side as this takes place. But again, this is for photo clarity only. Got to make sure that we're actually applying pressure against something that's not going to slip. Okay, let's do this. So there we go. We've got a nicely cut saw kerf in an insert that itself can be replaced. Huh. You know, with all your guards in place, it's hard to reach stuff underneath the table. I'm curious about this and how well it works. Normally when I rip with the fence, from my perspective, to the right of the blade. That allows me to operate over here with the on-off switch. For this purpose, I'll go ahead and do it from over on that side. But what I want to do here is I want to bring the cut up and see whether or not we are clearing that splitter. So here we go. That is ever so slightly tight on this side. You can feel the resistance right there. Let's see if I were to move the fence over to the other side, position this in the same position. Would it also be tight? Oh, I miss being able to adjust my blade's position. It's the downside of having a zero clearance insert is you lose that ability to move the blade on the quill. But I'm just barely kissing the teeth there, and just now, yeah, we're clearing that on the back side. Yeah, I like it. Now, where would you use this? In the past, you've seen me use my ripping jig, Jack the Stripper, for ripping very, very narrow stock. And the reason why I use that is because I like to not have a thin piece trapped between the blade and the fence. Instead, I have that jig that helps to push the stock through. But I always use a zero clearance insert because those strips can be so narrow that they can get drawn into the saw insert right alongside the blade. If you're using the standard insert, you could have up to a 1/4 inch gap between the edge of the table and the saw blade. So this is the preferred way. Also, when you're cutting veneers, and particularly hardwood veneers, cross-cutting hardwood veneers, getting support all the way out there to the edge of your cut is going to help to give you a cleaner cut line with less splintering. All right, so let's take a look at the Zero Clear drill plate. Now this one can be used for drilling. It can also be used for shaping and for drum sanding. So I have a drum sanding insert right here, standard 510, 520 drum sanding insert. If I lay these against each other face to face, you can see how this larger bore is the same size as the drum sanding bore, and the smaller bore is the same size, and maybe a little smaller than the shaper bore. Now, what we want here is we want to be able to have dust collection from below. We want to have our shaper arbor so that we can send at least the nut on the bottom of the arbor down below the table surface. So this is great. I could use this for shaping. I could use this for drum sanding. Here's the largest drum sander that Shopsmith made, and there you can see fits right in there perfectly. Again, we've got threaded inserts on the back that would allow us to move our dust chute from the bottom of one of our other inserts, if we already have them, right over to this insert. So that's a great design. So when we put this in place, this should align that hole dead center underneath our spindle. There we go. And we'll tighten that in place. With our machine screws. Right now I happen to have a large Forstner bit installed. Before I take that bit out though, I'm going to go ahead and extend the quill down, and I'm going to use that to help me get this located in the center. I can move the table in and out with the rack and pinion height adjustment. Normally it's for height adjustment in the table saw disc sander mode. In drill press mode, we can use that to move the table in and out. And in fact, that looks to be awfully close to the diameter, and it is, of the hole that's all the way through. So we can tighten this in place, and that should be centered directly underneath that spindle. That's what I want. So if I wanted to use this as a backup for that bit, I might have that positioned dead center. Now I want to point out to you that this insert has an area that's indicated as a safe zone. And the idea behind that is we're not going to bore into the shoulder that helps to support this insert in place. So when we're doing our boring through, if we need to go all the way through, just be alert to the fact that you'll be drilling into the plate below if you drill outside of the safe zone. But what's cool about this is I can dedicate this insert to a particular diameter drill bit and use that as my backup for drilling that size. Depending upon which version you buy, you can get this with 4 or 5 of these inserts or 10 of these inserts if you think you're really going to be going through them like crazy. But I'm going to go ahead and swap out this bit with a smaller brad point drill bit, maybe something a little closer to maybe 3/8 of an inch. Just got to find the right chuck key. There we go. And yes, I have too many chuck keys. 3/8 drill bit. So for this, if I want to be able to use this insert for multiple sizes of drills, what I could do is I could just position this off center, and now I can just kind of work around that like a turntable, and I could indicate that that's a 3/8 inch drill bit. Now the idea behind this is we're not going to drill any more than, let's say, 1/8 of an inch into this. If I'm drilling all the way through my stock, I have several ways of doing this. What I could do is to bring my stock up, bury the tip of the bit in, and set this, well, I need to get actually the shoulder of that bit. This is a bullet point bit from Black & Decker, not a brad point exactly. And from that point on, how much further do I want to drill? So if this is 1/2 inch stock, I could dial this into 1/2 inch. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drill that exact same depth into my drill plate. So that's where I want this bit to stop drilling, stop advancing. So if I extend my quill out to that point and reset this for 0, then all of my holes that I drill should drill to that step, that depth that's just beyond the thickness of this material. Let's drill a couple holes. That is an aggressive bit. It lifted up out of the end of these two cuts right here. I got a much cleaner cut here. I need to swap just a regular old brad point drill bit. That's my favorite. Let me go get one of those. An old Shopsmith 7/16 inch brad point drill bit. Let's swap these out. And because I'm drilling 7/16 now, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this plate. So I'm going to pop this out, and while I've got it, I might as well go ahead and write on there that is 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to rotate that around, and I'm going to go ahead and call this one 7/16. Notice that we're still outside of the safe zone, even if we were going to need to drill all the way through for whatever reason we could. I'll line that up over there. And let's put this brad point drill bit in place. If you know, you know. We're going to drill into that insert. Stop it right there. So that is my new 0. We'll 0 that out at that position. And now let's drill a few more holes with a real brad point drill bit, see if that behaves any differently. And there we go. We got a nice clean entry and exit, unlike our Black & Decker bullet bits. Wish these bits were still sold. These were made by a company called Forest City here in North Carolina, and they were made for Shopsmith for many, many years. And I'm not sure if you can find those anymore. It's the same company that also makes the white side router bits, and they've had some financial trouble in recent years. So I'm not sure where we stand with that. Anyway, so here you can see I can have multiple drilling locations, and in fact, they're drilling diameters. And if I want to, if I don't drill all the way through, I can go ahead and have a few more over on this side. And I can dedicate these to the various sizes that I'm drilling. Very clever design. So I'm going to line this up for drum sanding. And at that point, I am ready to go. If I had the ability to add a dust chute to the bottom of this, I could hook it up to my dust collector or my shop vacuum and we're ready to do that as well. It's pretty slick. Daniel, I'm impressed. If you're interested in this, I will share his contact information down below. And I will report back soon if I find out anything about Shopsmith that we don't already know. With that, I welcome your questions, comments, and cheap shots, and make it a great day.